Hey everyone, I'm working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy this content, please hit that subscribe button right now. The Philadelphia Phillies organization just dropped a bombshell that has sent shockwaves through the baseball world, and somehow nobody seems to be talking about it. While fans and analysts have been obsessing over every possible scenario for the outfield next season, scrutinizing every potential trade target and free agent signing, one name has been conspicuously absent from the conversation. That name is Johan Rojas, the player who was supposed to be the future of center field in Philadelphia, the defensive wizard who was going to patrol the outfield at Citizens Bank Park for the next decade. But here's the kicker. His future with the franchise is now hanging by a thread, and the Phillies are quietly shopping him around like yesterday's news. Remember when Johan Rojas was the golden child? The phenom who could track down any ball in the gap? The player whose glove was so electric that it made up for whatever offensive deficiencies he might have had? Yeah, those days are over, and the fall from grace has been swift, brutal, and absolutely stunning. This isn't just about one player's decline. This is about a complete organizational shift in philosophy, a reshuffling of priorities that could define the next era of Phillies baseball, and most importantly, this could be the domino that sets off a chain reaction of moves that transforms this entire roster. Let's rewind the tape to the start of the 2025 season. Johan Rojas wasn't just on the roster. He wasn't just a role player or a fourth outfielder waiting for his chance. He was the guy in center field. He was getting regular playing time, day in and day out, manning the most important defensive position in the outfield. The organization believed in him. The fans believed in him. His defensive metrics were off the charts, and even though his bat left something to be desired, there was this understanding that defense up the middle wins championships. The Phillies were willing to live with the offensive shortcomings because what Rojas provided with his glove was simply irreplaceable. Then came the trade deadline, and everything changed. The Phillies made a move for Harrison Bader, the veteran center fielder with postseason pedigree and a track record of big moments. Suddenly, Rojas found himself in a platoon situation. Then he found himself on the bench. Then, in the most telling move of all, he found himself in the minors, Triple-A, sent down while the team was making a playoff push. And when October rolled around and the Phillies were building their postseason roster, Johan Rojas wasn't even in consideration. The official story? A groin injury, a quad issue that he picked up at the end of the Triple-A season. But come on, let's be real here. That's the kind of convenient excuse that organizations use when they don't want to publicly admit they've given up on a player. Dave Dombrowski can spin it however he wants, but the writing is on the wall in big, bold letters that even the most optimistic Phillies fan can't ignore. Johan Rojas, at just 25 years old, has essentially blown his opportunity to be a cornerstone piece of this franchise, and now, according to multiple reports, including one from Matt Gelb of The Athletic, Rojas is officially available in trade discussions. Not quietly available. Not maybe available if someone makes an offer we can't refuse. Available. Period. The Phillies are taking calls, listening to offers, and seriously considering moving on from a player they once viewed as untouchable. Think about how crazy that is. We're talking about one of the best defensive center fielders in all of baseball, a player whose defensive metrics put him in elite company, a 25-year-old who should theoretically be entering his prime years, and the Phillies are ready to ship him out after just 530 plate appearances over 2 seasons. Sure, his OPS has been under 600 during that span, which is legitimately concerning for a team that desperately needs offensive production. But the speed with which this organization has soured on Rojas tells you everything you need to know about where their priorities lie now. The Phillies aren't interested in being a defense-first team anymore. They've watched themselves get outgunned offensively in the playoffs. They've seen their lineup go cold at the worst possible times. They've experienced the frustration of excellent pitching being wasted because they couldn't manufacture enough runs, and they've decided that elite defense in center field isn't worth the automatic out in the lineup that comes with it. That's a massive philosophical shift, and Johan Rojas is the sacrificial lamb at the altar of this new offensive-minded approach. But here's where things get really interesting, because the Rojas situation isn't happening in a vacuum. This is all interconnected with a series of decisions that the Phillies are making right now that will define what this team looks like in 2026. And at the center of all of it is a 22-year-old prospect named Justin Crawford, who has apparently leapfrogged everyone in the organizational depth chart to claim the center field job before he's even played a single major league game. Dave Dombrowski went on record at the general manager meetings in Las Vegas and essentially anointed Crawford as the center fielder of the future. His exact words are telling. He acknowledged that Crawford struggles with certain things compared to others, which is executive speak for he's got defensive limitations, but then Dombrowski pivoted to the positives, noting that Crawford has improved and that his speed makes up for what he lacks in terms of jump and instincts, specifically mentioning that Crawford doesn't have the same quickness of a jump that Johan Rojas has. And then came the kicker. Dombrowski said they feel confident with Crawford in center field, and crucially, he added that the bat, theoretically, is better. That word, theoretically, is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, because Justin Crawford has never faced major league pitching. He's been tearing it up in the minors, absolutely raking at every level, and his bloodlines are impeccable. He's the son of four-time All-Star Carl Crawford, so baseball is in his DNA. But theory and reality are two very different things, and the Phillies are essentially gambling that Crawford's offensive upside is significant enough to outweigh any defensive downgrade from Rojas. That's a massive bet to make, especially when you consider that they're seemingly willing to hand him the job without even giving him a chance to prove himself at the major league level first. This raises so many questions. If Justin Crawford was truly ready, if he was as polished and major league ready as the organization is now claiming, why wasn't he called up at any point last season? The Phillies went through some serious offensive struggles. They had stretches where they desperately needed a spark. Max Kepler was brought in and didn't exactly set the world on fire. Nick Castellanos was wildly inconsistent. There were multiple opportunities to give Crawford a shot, to see what he could do against big league pitching in low-pressure situations, but they didn't. They kept him in the minors all season long, and now, suddenly, they're ready to pencil him in as the opening day center fielder? Something doesn't add up. The skeptic in me wonders if this is less about Justin Crawford being ready and more about the organization being desperate to find a solution that addresses multiple problems at once. They need offense. They need youth. They need team-controlled players who won't eat up payroll space. Crawford checks all those boxes, but are they rushing him because he's truly ready? Or are they rushing him because they've backed themselves into a corner with some of their other roster decisions? Which brings us to the elephant in the room, Nick Castellanos, the $20 million man who has essentially been shown the door in the politest way possible. Dave Dombrowski's comments about Castellanos at the GM meetings were diplomatic, but absolutely damning. He acknowledged having a lengthy conversation with Castellanos and said they're open-minded for discussion purposes, but then he dropped this line. Sometimes change of scenery can be beneficial for people too. That's not subtle. That's not leaving the door open. That's Dombrowski essentially telling the baseball world that he's trying to move Castellanos, and that everyone should feel free to make offers. And honestly, can you blame him? Let's look at what Castellanos actually produced last season. In his 33 season across 547 at-bats, he hit 17 home runs with 72 RBIs. His on-base percentage was a paltry .294. His slugging percentage was exactly .400. Those are not the numbers of a player making $20 million. Those are not the numbers of a middle-of-the-order bat on a championship-caliber team. He struck out 133 times while only drawing 32 walks. The plate discipline wasn't there. The power production was mediocre at best. And defensively, he was a liability in right field. But here's the thing that makes the Castellanos situation even more complicated. His attitude and relationship with the coaching staff completely fell apart. He was benched as a punishment for something he said to manager Rob Thompson in June. Think about that. A player making $20 million was benched not because of performance, but because of insubordination. That's a massive red flag. Then, as his playing time diminished down the stretch because the team pivoted to platooning the corner outfield spots, Castellanos publicly expressed frustration with both his diminished role and with Thompson. He made it clear he wasn't happy. He wanted to play more. He felt he deserved more opportunities. Now, there's a part of me that actually respects that mentality. A player who wants to be on the field, who has that competitive fire and believes in himself, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The biggest criticism of Castellanos is literally that he wants to play more baseball. But there's a right way and a wrong way to handle those frustrations, and based on how this all played out, Castellanos clearly didn't navigate it well. When you're a veteran making that kind of money, and you're openly clashing with your manager during a playoff push, you're creating a toxic situation. The Phillies have made it abundantly clear they're not interested in running that back. So the door is shut on Castellanos. The Phillies are going to try to trade him in a salary dump situation, and if they can't find a taker, they might even release him and eat the money. Either way, he's not going to be wearing a Phillies uniform in 2026. That means the Phillies have a massive hole to fill in right field, and it needs to be filled with someone who can actually hit right-handed pitching consistently. This is where things get really interesting, because the player who keeps popping up in rumors and speculation is Steven Kwan from the Cleveland Guardians. Jim Bowden reported that Cleveland is open to trading Kwan this offseason, and honestly, from a Phillies perspective, this makes a ton of sense. Kwan is exactly the type of player this lineup desperately needs. Last season, across 625 at-bats, he hit 11 home runs with 56 RBIs and a .330 on-base percentage. His slugging percentage was .374. He had 170 hits and 21 stolen bases. But here's the stat that should make every Phillies fan's eyes light up. He only struck out 60 times in 625 at-bats. 60 strikeouts. Compare that to Castellanos' 133 strikeouts in fewer at-bats. Compare it to Harrison Bader's 136 strikeouts in only 448 at-bats. When you have a lineup built around Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, two players who are prone to strikeouts themselves, you absolutely need to surround them with contact hitters. You need guys who can put the ball in play, who can move runners over, who can manufacture runs in different ways. Steven Kwan is that type of player. He's a pure contact hitter who rarely strikes out, and that skill set is incredibly valuable in the context of what the Phillies need. Now, Kwan isn't perfect for this situation. He's a left-handed bat, which isn't ideal when you're trying to balance the lineup. The power numbers are underwhelming for a corner outfielder, but the defensive metrics are solid, and more importantly, he's a winning player who does all the little things right. If the Phillies could somehow construct an outfield of Steven Kwan, Justin Crawford, and another right-handed power bat to replace Castellanos, that starts to look like a unit with real potential. But here's the million-dollar question. What happens to Harrison Bader in all of this? This is where things get complicated because the commitment to Justin Crawford as the center fielder of the future seems to signal that Bader might not be coming back. Think about it logically. Bader is a center fielder at his core. Yes, he can play the corners, and he did so effectively when needed. But when you watch him play, it's obvious that his natural position is center field. He's a Gold Glove caliber defender up the middle. His instincts, his routes, his range, everything about his game screams center fielder. So if the Phillies are committed to Crawford in center, where does that leave Bader? Are they going to ask him to move to a corner full-time? At 31 years old, coming off a career year where he hit 17 home runs and 54 RBIs with a .347 on-base percentage and .449 slugging percentage, Bader was exactly what the Phillies needed at the trade deadline. He provided veteran leadership, defensive stability, and surprisingly, consistent offensive production. He was a massive upgrade over what they were getting from other options. But contracts and commitments matter, and if Bader is looking for a multi-year deal that guarantees him playing time in center field, the Phillies might not be able to offer him that. Not if they're serious about Crawford being the guy. And that would be a shame, because Bader proved he still has plenty left in the tank. But this is the cold reality of roster construction in Major League Baseball. Sometimes good players become casualties of organizational decisions that have nothing to do with their performance. The alternative scenario is that the Phillies bring Bader back on a short-term deal and use him as a super utility outfielder who can play all three positions, provide defense off the bench, and spell Crawford when needed. That's not a terrible option, and it would give Crawford some breathing room as he adjusts to the major leagues. But it's hard to imagine Bader, a player with his pedigree and track record, being satisfied with that kind of reduced role. Dave Dombrowski addressed this head-on when he acknowledged how difficult it is to find right-handed outfielders who can actually hit. His quote was brutally honest. Somebody asked him if he wanted to get a right-handed outfielder, and his response was basically, "Yeah, I do. So do a lot of other people, and where do I find them? It's not easy to do. That's why we have jobs." He's not wrong. The market for quality right-handed hitting outfielders is incredibly thin, and every team is chasing the same limited pool of players. The Phillies are going to have to get creative, whether that means trading for someone like Steven Kwan, taking a chance on a bounce-back candidate, or making a big splash in free agency. One name that's been mentioned as a potential reunion candidate is Cedric Mullins from the Baltimore Orioles. Mullins is a switch hitter who had a down year but has shown in the past that he can be a productive player. A one-year prove-it deal for Mullins could make sense if the price is right. But that's far from a home run solution. That's more of a, let's see if we can catch lightning in a bottle move. The bigger picture here is that the Phillies are at a crossroads with their outfield construction, and every decision they make is going to have cascading effects on the rest of the roster. If they trade Johan Rojas, they're admitting that defense isn't the priority it once was. If they move on from Castellanos, they're creating a hole that needs to be filled with offensive production. If they hand the keys to Justin Crawford without a real audition, they're betting big on an unproven commodity. If they don't bring back Harrison Bader, they're losing one of their most consistent performers from the second half of last season. These aren't small decisions. These are franchise-altering moves that will determine whether the Phillies are legitimate World Series contenders or whether they're going to spend another year as a good team that can't quite get over the hump. And the fact that all of this is happening simultaneously with so many moving parts and interconnected decisions makes it even more critical that the front office gets this right. The Johan Rojas situation is the perfect microcosm of everything that's happening with this organization right now. Here's a player who was supposed to be untouchable, a cornerstone piece, the future of the position, and in the span of one season, he went from everyday starter to trade bait. That's not a reflection of Rojas as much as it's a reflection of how quickly things can change in this sport and how ruthless organizations have to be when they're trying to build a championship roster. Rojas will likely get another chance somewhere else, and honestly, he might thrive in a different situation. There are plenty of teams that would love to have an elite defensive center fielder who's still just 25 years old. Maybe he figures out the offensive side of the game with a fresh start. Maybe he becomes the player the Phillies thought he could be, just in a different uniform. But for Philadelphia, the message is clear. Defense alone isn't enough anymore. This team needs to score runs, and they're going to prioritize offense over everything else. So what's the ideal outfield for the Phillies in 2026? Based on everything we know right now, the most realistic scenario seems to be Justin Crawford in center field, Steven Kwan in left field if they can pull off a trade, and then some combination of a right-handed power bat or potentially even Brandon Marsh playing more regularly in right field. Marsh is another interesting piece in all of this because he's actually a stronger defender in the corners than he is in center, despite spending time at all three positions. If the Phillies wanted to, they could platoon Marsh with a right-handed bat and create a pretty formidable corner outfield tandem. But that still feels incomplete. That still feels like a team that's one piece away from having a truly elite outfield. And maybe that one piece is Kyle Tucker, the superstar outfielder from the Houston Astros who has been mentioned in trade rumors. Tucker would be the home run acquisition, the player who instantly makes the Phillies one of the most dangerous offensive teams in baseball. But the cost to acquire someone like Tucker would be astronomical, likely requiring the Phillies to part with multiple top prospects and potentially major league talent. Is Dave Dombrowski willing to make that kind of all-in move? Based on his track record, you can never count it out. The bottom line is this: the Phillies' outfield is going to look dramatically different in 2026. Johan Rojas is on his way out. Nick Castellanos is on his way out. Harrison Bader's return is questionable at best. Justin Crawford is being anointed as the center fielder before he's proven anything. And the front office is scrambling to find the right combination of players who can balance defense with the offensive firepower this team desperately needs. It's chaotic, it's uncertain, and it's absolutely fascinating to watch unfold. The next few months are going to determine the trajectory of this franchise for years to come. Will the Phillies be bold enough to make the big moves necessary to get back to the World Series? Will Justin Crawford live up to the hype and justify the organization's faith in him? Will they find that elusive right-handed bat who can protect Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber in the lineup? These are the questions that should be keeping Dave Dombrowski up at night, and they're the questions that every Phillies fan should be obsessing over right now. One thing is for sure: the days of Johan Rojas being the future of this franchise are over, and that fact alone represents a seismic shift in how the Phillies view themselves and what they need to be successful. Whether that shift leads to championship glory or another disappointing playoff exit remains to be seen. But make no mistake, this is a franchise at a turning point, and the decisions made this offseason will echo for years to come. What do you think the ideal Phillies outfield looks like for 2026? Are we completely underestimating the possibility of a Kyle Tucker trade? Is Justin Crawford actually ready for the spotlight, or are the Phillies setting him up to fail by rushing him to the majors? Should they bring back Harrison Bader on a multi-year deal, or is it time to move on and commit fully to youth? These are the debates we need to be having right now as this roster takes shape. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this is one of the most critical off-seasons in recent Phillies history, and every fan should have an opinion on how this team should be constructed. If you found this deep dive valuable and want to stay on top of every twist and turn as the Phillies reshape their roster, make sure you smash that subscribe button right now. We're going to be covering every trade rumor, every signing, every roster move, and every implication for this team as they try to build a World Series contender. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown, drop your comments below with your takes on the outfield situation, and make sure you've got notifications turned on so you never miss an update. The Phillies offseason is just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.